Hello friends, CS Anuja this side and welcome to the CS Mentor channel. For those of you who are new to my channel, we provide classes for the CS executive level, both at the module 1 as well as module 2. So in this video, we're going to be looking at what you will be studying under the subject, that is your setting up of business entities, industrial and labor laws. So first things first, this subject falls part of your module 1. It is paper number 3 in your module 1. So you'll be writing the subject along with jurisprudence, company law, as well as your corporate accounting paper. So let's take a deep dive into what we're going to be studying about in this particular subject. Now you'll notice that the subject is divided into two parts, part A and part B. Part A is the setting up of the business entities aspect. So everything to do with the actual setting it up, we're going to be studying about in part A, and this consists of 60 marks of your subject. And your part B is your industrial and labor laws, which consists of 40 marks of the entire subject. Now, this entire paper is a theoretical paper. There are no sums involved in this, and largely it is a law paper. So, what are we going to be looking at as a gist in this entire subject is that when you look at the setting up of business entities that falls under the 60 mark weightage, we see that there is the initial concept that you'll be studying about from a company law perspective. So, company law tells us how a business entity is required to be started, the incorporation process, and any other registration process that is involved. But you see, we don't just directly jump into the procedural aspects of starting a business entity. We first study about why people choose certain business entities. Like, why is it that someone would go for a proprietorship as compared to going for a listed entity? Why does someone go for a nidhi company, or why does someone choose to engage with a microfinance company? So ultimately, it is the selection of business organization that we will initially be looking at, and then subsequently we look at LLPs and corporate entities, which is the core aspect of business entities in India. Now you'll see that in the recent past, the government has largely tried to push up the startups and the startup culture too. So we deep dive into what is a startup, what benefits are given to a startup, and what does a startup require to be able to progress or jump into its requirements. Subsequently, we also see that the government is trying to push provider support for your MSMEs. So these two chapters are looked at from a more recent perspective of how business entities are started from an MSME or even a startup perspective. Then we look at why certain business entities convert, whether they are converting from, let's say, a private company into a listed company, or from a public company into a private company, or why does anyone shift from an LLP or a company, the conversion aspects. But it's not just the companies that we'll be looking at. You see, there are so many other corporate organizations that we come into contact with, such as nidhi companies, producer companies, foreign entities, banks, microfinance institutions, so many corporate entities that we deal with on a daily basis. So we take a look at all of these financial service organizations, non-corporate entities such as trusts, partnerships, etc. And then we also look at what does it mean to be able to set up an entity outside of India. Or if a foreign entity wants to come into India, then what is the process for all of it? And largely, you'll see that not every entity is governed by one single law. There are various different laws that apply to various different industries, and it has its own requirement of licenses, registrations, and compliances. So, we'll also be looking at it from an industry perspective, why certain industries have certain compliances and what kind of registrations they require. But you see, every entity requires some basic registrations. Mostly, you realize that falls under the requirement of a PAN or a TAN number, or even a GST number, or a shop establishment license, or an FSSAI license. Some initial registrations that is required for every single company. And we'll also be looking at, obviously, different industries and how different laws apply in the case of each one of them. So this entire topic is covered in the first 13 chapters, falling under part A, and this is 60 marks. Part B consists of entirely to do with your industrial and labor code. Very recently, the labor code has undergone vast changes. So we look at it, we study the subject from a point of view of understanding what is the constitutional provision that supports these labor laws. More importantly, we look at how these labor laws have evolved over time, and that is the first two chapters under part B that we look at. And then subsequently, every single chapter that comes after has to do with the different codes that were introduced in 2019 and 2020. We do see some individual labor related laws in this chapter, and this forms part of your 40 mark weightage in this chapter. So, if I have to break down what exactly you are required to be prepared with in this chapter, is that largely we can see that this subject is a little bit technical. I will call this subject a little bit technical. I won't say that it is entirely 100% technical. I will say that the concepts are really easy to understand, but a lot of words are definitely technical in nature. And like I said, this is a purely theoretical subject. So, in fact, we can say that students will find the subject easier to study because it can be read as a story format and much easier to remember. Now, one benefit of this particular subject is that it is divided into the 60 mark plus 40 mark weightage. And so students can concentrate on the more important chapters and try to get a better marking while attempting the examination. And where you're finding some parts of this chapter which are a little too technical is what I'll say, that also can be managed in this particular subject. So, all in all, I will say that yes, this subject falls under something which you call as a scoring paper. Now, one thing that many students ask me is, ma'am, is it so technical that in case I don't clear my attempt in the first attempt itself, would I have to take classes again for this subject? Well, in that case, I would say no. The first time study itself is sufficient for students to be able to understand the entire subject and be comfortable with it and even clear this paper. So with this, we come to an end of our basic understanding of our setting up of business entities and industrial and labor laws paper. So if you like this video, I would like you to go on to the rest of this playlist. I have put out some demo videos about the setting up of business entities chapter, and I shall see you in that video.